Well, hi, and welcome to episode 10 of Newb Eden. Just want to say big thanks to everyone who's been so supportive so far of the channel and for your subscriptions and comments. Much appreciated. Hey, today we are going to spend some time looking at the overview and trying to demystify this thing called the overview and how you can set it up and customize it to work exactly for you in whatever particular scenario you find yourself in. So back in episode 7, we talked about the 4 layers of situational awareness: your solar system level, your D-scan level, your overview or your grid level, and then your tactical overlay. So today it's that third layer we want to focus on, the overview, that 8,000 kilometer sphere that has your ship at the center of it and what information you can get and how you can have that information presented or filtered to you through this incredibly important tool called your overview. Now, I just used the word filter, and for me, I think that's a really good description about what your overview is. You can set up multiple different filters and just simply apply them to your overview and have them available to give you the information you need based on whatever it is you're doing at that time. You'll have a certain filter maybe for mining, a certain filter for PvP, etc. So let's go ahead and look at how we can create those filters and how we can apply them to our overview. So here's the big picture. You have an overview that allows you to have multiple tabs that you can quickly flip between. Each tab you can apply an overview filter to that to give you specific information. In this case, by default, I've got a general overview tab. I've got a mining overview tab that has many things filtered out and only shows me things that are relevant maybe to mining. This one is warp to, things celestial objects I could warp to, and we're going to create our own. So let's go ahead and create our first one by clicking on the add tab icon. We are going to create a blank tab to start with, which we'll use as a template to build upon. So if I hit OK now, you'll see I've got a blank tab, but when I click on it, it's not blank. Let's fix that right now. We are going to click on the overview settings here, this little menu icon in the top left corner, open overview settings, and the first tab across a number of tabs here is our overview tabs. It's showing us which tabs are up and what they are showing. So you'll see, in line with our general mining warp to and blank, general mining warp to and blank. You will notice, however, that under the overview preset column, it's showing general. So my blank tab is showing a general overview preset. And if I click on that, you can see these are the built-in default presets that the game has that you can now attach to this tab. So if I was to change this to my mining tab, you'll see now that my mining preset, my blank tab is now showing the mining preset. For the moment, ignore this column, bracket preset. We'll come back to that, leave them all as show all brackets. Now, we don't have yet a blank preset. We're going to make our own in a moment and attach it to this. But quickly, while we're here, you can even create your new tabs from here. So if I was to create a test and, I don't know, alpha, whatever you want to call them, and you'll see now that they are popping up as new tabs. You can have up to 8. If I want to delete a tab, right-click, delete tab, right-click, delete tab, and you'll see they disappeared from my tab names. Finally, you can add some color if you'd like to customize the look of this. So let's say for the general tab, you'll see now the text comes up as yellow. Let's move on and create that blank preset. To do that, we are going to come across to the next tab in our settings window, and that is our tab presets. I wonder if I can make this bigger. Let's make that a bit bigger. Within this tab, we have a couple of options: types and states. Let's look at types for the moment. This filter turns things on and off, turns items on and off, and they're in subcategories: asteroids, celestial, etc., etc. So within these, you can pull down the disclosure triangle and see and turn on and off various items. So if you are to add all of those up, there are 370 different individual items you can toggle on and off. For the moment, we want to turn them all off to create our blank. So let's come down here to deselect all, and you'll see every one of these brackets shows 0 out of 29 or 0 of 38. Everything here shows a 0. They're not on my preset, and now you can see that it shows up as blank. Now we want to save that. At the moment, that's just temporary. So you'll see a save button, and it says we're on the mining preset. We've made some changes that are not saved. Let's save them, and it will ask for a name. Now we want to call this our blank preset. I'm going to hit OK. It says, are you sure? Oh, well, in this case, it didn't exist. If you've already got one, it will ask, do you actually want to overwrite this? We'll see that shortly. And now I've got my blank tab. And in fact, if I come back to my overview tabs, not only do I have my tab called blank, but it is now showing a preset called blank. And we will use this as a template to create some other overview presets. So let's create a preset now that only shows ships. So I'm coming to my tab presets, and I'm going to come down to the ship category, and you'll see there are 46 different options. Now I don't need to click them all individually. I can go up here to the category heading, right click on that and go select all. So if I right click on the ship heading, hit select all, you'll now see that my blank tab has fired up some information, and it's showing me all the ships that are on grid within inside this 8,000 kilometer sphere. Now I'm sitting about 5,500 k's off Jita, so there's a lot of ship traffic, a lot of ships showing up here. Now you'll see that has not been saved yet. So I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to give this the name ships. Hit OK because that doesn't exist. It won't ask me for an overwrite. I now have a preset called ships, but my tab here is showing blank. So let's go back and change this to ships. And I might even make this, let's make this red just to be fancy. So now I've got a ships tab that is an overview preset showing me ships only. Everything else is filtered out. And as I jump between them, I can quickly come back and say if I only want to see ships, there is nothing else on here other than ships. Well, congratulations. That was your first preset. Well done. You're a legend. And but we are going to get a little bit funky with them now and show you some other things that you can customize on your presets to make them even more useful. Let's jump over to our tab presets. We've already filtered based on type. Now I'm going to filter that even further based on a pilot's state or their relationship with me, because I can turn pilots off based on these settings. So let's have a look. I've got the option to either have a pilot always show, have a pilot be filtered out permanently, or to show by default. So let's create a preset that only shows me ships and only people who are in fleet with me currently. So let's create a new tab. We'll call it fleet and hit OK. I'm going to click over to that, and I'm now going to right click and load the preset called ships. Now this tab and this tab are basically showing the exact same things. They're showing the same preset. So let's filter my fleet one down by turning off. Now I could go through and turn off everyone who's not in my fleet, but instead I can click the top one. A shortcut is shift click at the bottom, and you'll see everything disappears. I filtered out every pilot, but I want to turn on now pilots who are just in my fleet. So if I click always show, you'll see nothing happened. That's okay. We need to save it and just reset it first. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to call this one fleet members because this is a preset, and hit OK. I'm overriding one that already exists. I'm okay with that. Just click out into any other tab and then come back, and you'll now have a tab called fleet that is showing the fleet members preset, and it is only showing the pilots who are on grid with me and in my fleet. And there he is, Billy Daniels. So hopefully you can start to see now how we can start to build and customize presets that only show certain items and only show pilots that have a certain relationship with me. So if I go back into that presets, I might also want to show pilots who are maybe in my alliance, pilots who are in my corporation, etc. So I can turn on and off multiple things. Now I like to do it this way. I don't like to use the show by default because I want to be have total control and say, well, it's either going to show or is not going to show. Now here's where things can get messy. How does Eve prioritize and deal with conflicting or multiple states? Because this pilot here, Billy Daniels, is in my fleet, but he may also have a terrible standing towards me. So let's do that. Let's set his standing as negative, and that's something you can do if you come across a pilot and you have a negative interaction. You might want to set their standing so that next time they come on grid or in local, you can see, this person I have set as a bad standing. So I'm going to grab this name, in this case from Fleet. You can do it from the local chat window. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a contact. Now it says, well, what kind of standing does this contact have towards you? And it can range from terrible, bad, neutral, good, or excellent. Now I'm going to set him as terrible. I could send him a notification to say I've set him. I'm not going to in this case. I'm just going to leave it as a terrible standing, add contact. Now when I come back to the states, you will see that he is still showing. Even though pilot has a terrible standing is filtered out, it's because he still has this state. If I was to in fact turn this off, he's now disappeared from my fleet overview because he doesn't meet either of these states. He's neither in my fleet, but if I was to turn on always show pilots with a terrible standing, he's back, even though I've got fleet members turned off. So long as one of these states are met, they will show up on the overview if that state has been set to always show. Now importantly, because we have made some changes, don't forget you'll need to come back and save them. It's currently showing me that my fleet members preset is not saved. Because we've been playing around with these and making changes, I need to save it. I'm keeping the same name, so do I want to overwrite the existing one? Yes, I do. We have covered a fair bit of ground so far, so let's just quickly pause and review. You guys now have the skills and the ability to create new overview tabs. And within each tab, you can create and apply presets for that tab, up to 8 across your overview. Within those presets, you can filter out based on an item's type or a pilot's state. Now let's go even deeper down the rabbit hole and we'll jump across to the appearance tab. This is so important because if you start doing things like particularly faction warfare, the default overview is not your friend, and there's so many occasions where someone has come and killed someone when they shouldn't have because they haven't got this bit right. So here we go, buckle up, let's talk about appearances. Appearances gives us some further customization to provide information about pilots or items on our overview. Those two things are color tags and background. Now the background refers to the background color. And you can see here in my current fleet tab with my fleet members preset loaded that my fleet member is showing with this colored background. Now I'm not going to tell you what the colors are because I'm colorblind, so I'm going to say this color before I embarrass myself and call blue purple or whatever, so bear with me. This color is this one here. Pilot is in your fleet. So if I wanted that a different color, let's say I wanted to show my fleet colors, I can hover over this arrow and change the color to this. Now you'll see that the background color has changed for my fleet members. Now traditionally, I'm in trouble here with colors, guys, seriously, I'm so bad, I'm so sorry. I'm going to change it back to this. But you can set background colors for various states that a pilot has. So in this case, my fleet pilot is in my fleet, and you can turn them on or off. So I just turned off the background color there for pilot is in my fleet. If I turn it back on, it will re-show. You'll also notice this one is blinking. You have the option, if you right click in the row, you can toggle blink. So you'll see that my background color now will start to blink for this state. Pilot is in my fleet. This is the background color. I've set the blink on. Personally, I always turn the blink off for everything. Just for me, it's a personal preference, because if you get in a big fight, lots of people on grid, that whole overview flashing can be really distracting, and I can find it really hard to find the information that I need. So I'm going to turn that off. Go through and decide what colors you want to set for your backgrounds and whether you want those backgrounds turned on or off. Personally, I'm going to turn them all on. You'll notice, however, I cannot shift click in this case. I will need to do them all individually. Just for the sake of this exercise, I'm turning them all on. I want every pilot to have some kind of a background. So now when I go back to my ships tab, for example, you'll see a color-coded, highlighted information stream that shows me these pilots have these neutral backgrounds. So down here, pilot has neutral standing set to gray. I can see that they're neutral. These guys being colored, however, are meeting some other criteria of this list. And here's the guy at the top, of course, who is in my fleet. Now, there is no right or wrong way to set this up. It's completely personal preference. I'm going to pause here for a second and set up my backgrounds how I would normally play and explain to you why I do it that way. All right, here we go. Now, because of my aforementioned problem with colors, I try to keep my background coloring kind of to a limited number of colors because I've obviously have trouble differentiating sometimes. Let me walk you through what I've done and why I do it. Particularly in mind of flying around in high sec, there are certain things you can and can't attack without consequences or being killed by Concord. So I don't want to attack something that I can't. So everything that is red, I know I can kill. So if there's someone at war with me, with my corporation or with my militia, I set them to red. So if I see a red background, I know potentially that is a target. If they have a limited engagement with me, it's a target. It's legitimate and legal to engage in combat with them. If they're what we'll call an outlaw or a perma-flashy, sort of their security status is below -5, they'll also show as red, something I can kill. If they're a criminal in high sec, I can kill them without repercussions. Now, I've set suspect as yellow to differentiate them from criminal, but I know in my mind reds and yellows in high sec I can attack safely. Everything else I need to be careful of, I've set as grey. So just because someone has a terrible standing that I've set doesn't mean I can legally attack them. So I've set them as grey, and everything else that's kind of neutral or things that I sort of don't want to attack or interact with shows as grey. That's why you'll see so much on my list here is showing up as grey. There's nothing there I could legally go and attack or that I need to be wary of necessarily. The blues and purples I reserve for friendlies. So purple, I think that's purple for my fleet members, but everything else is blue. So if something's light blue or navy, it's friendly to me. So they're either in my corporation, my alliance, they have excellent standing, good standing is light blue. They're allies in my militia. If I was doing faction warfare, they show up as navy. So I know if they're an ally in one of my wars, the blues, friendly, reds and yellows potentially kill, grey is everything else. That's my system. You may want to come up with your own. Now, it does get a little bit more complicated because, once again, what happens if there's a conflict or a pilot meets multiple criteria? Well, unlike states where we looked at setting up a state, a pilot will show so long as he meets one of those states, in backgrounds, they are based on priority from top of the column down. So the highest priority color or closest to the top will be the one that shows. For example, Billy Daniels is in my fleet, but a few moments ago we also set him as having a terrible standing. So what color will show? Well, if I look at the list, pilot in your fleet sits higher in priority than terrible standing. So it will show as purple. If, however, I was to take pilot has terrible standing, click and drag that criteria so it sits above pilot is in your fleet, you'll see Billy Daniels now has returned to the grey background that represents pilot having terrible standing. And in fact, if I was to change that to yellow just for the sake of example, you'll see whatever is higher in the list. So he's in my fleet, he also has a terrible standing, the highest priority background color will show. Let's confirm if I click and drag that back under that he will return to the fleet background because it is now the higher priority. In fact, I'm going to change that back to grey before I forget. Let's take a quick look at a couple of scenarios where having your overview wrong could get you into trouble, just to help you understand why this is so important. Let's say you were going on a public fleet. You've joined up with a public roam, in which case for the duration of that fleet, everyone is effectively friendly, blue to each other, despite what might be going on in the rest of the game. Now, by default, if someone in that fleet is at war with your corporation or alliance, they will show up as red, killable. Potentially, you might actually just get this wrong and kill them even though they're in your fleet. So clicking and dragging this to the very top would override everything else, no matter what that other pilot is doing, no matter what standing, no matter whether they're criminal or suspect, or if they're at war, they will show up as being in your fleet, overriding every other criteria. Similarly, in something like faction warfare, it's a good practice to have at the top of the list all of your friendlies, all your blues. So if someone is in your fleet, put them at the top. If they are an ally in one or more of your wars, if they're in your militia or allied to your militia, if they're in your alliance, for example. These are all things, these are definitely people you don't want to attack. So put them at the top, so no matter what they've done, whether they were a criminal or a suspect, they're not going to be showing as something you can kill, because your top priority are these things at the top here. So you really want to think through carefully what order you have these set up in to avoid you accidentally killing someone that you shouldn't. And I think somewhere down the track in the not too distant future, we will do a video on faction warfare, and we will talk more about setting up a faction warfare overview when we get to that. Lastly, we're going to look at color tags. Now, they are just another sub-level of information. So we've highlighted by color, but you'll see these little icons in the bottom right corner for some of these pilots that have some information. If I hover over this, it says they have a security status below 0. If I hover over this one, this little icon means they're in my fleet. So I can have the background color, but I could also have another level of information based on their color tag, which also will show up next to their name in local. If I have a look here, this color tag shows me that Zig here is in the same corporation as me. Now, the color tag priority system works exactly the same as the background system. We can turn on or off color tags. We can select the color of the color tag. We can also turn on or off blinking. Now, I mentioned that I usually turn blinking off for background colors, but I'll often leave it on for color tags because they're much less visually distracting when there's a whole heap of them on the overview. So let's actually have a look at that in practice. We've got Billy Daniels here in our fleet, so he's showing up with our purple background. In our color tags, I can see pilot is in my fleet. He has the fleet color tag. That is because it's quite high up the priority list. Now remember, we also had him set as a terrible standing. So let's go down to terrible standing. Let's leave it as red. Let's just turn blink on. And if I click and drag that above the fleet priority in the color tags, you'll see the purple background is still there, but the color tag shows me that next sub-level of information. All right, this guy's in my fleet. The background tells me that. But I'm also aware that for some reason he has bad standing with me. So it's just another sub-layer of information you can have on your overview. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to set up your overview. I'm really only wanting to give you the tools so that you can go and think through, all right, what do I want to know? What information is important to me, and how can I present that on my overview so that I've got the best situational awareness for whatever scenario I find myself in. Now, I did briefly mention that as well as the color tag showing up here on your overview, it also shows in local. So if I have a look here in local with me, there's Billy Daniels. I can see that currently the color tag that has the highest priority is terrible standing. It's blinking, it's doing the exact same thing in local. So quite apart from the overview, I can get some information immediately about pilots who've come into system based on their color tag. So if I drag terrible standing down under fleet, you'll see the priority now switches the color tag to pilot is in your fleet. Well, we're in the home straight now, guys. We've covered the bulk of the technical side of the overview and the tools you have at your disposal to set up filters that give you exactly what you need. Let's look at these last few columns before we go. The columns tab simply allows you to turn on or off various information. Now, I'm going to drag this out. You'll see at the moment the columns we have are icon, distance, name, type, and velocity, which correspond to what's been turned on in the list here. Now, you may want other information. Now, I can drag these columns to tidy things up, make things bigger or smaller, as well as velocity. I might want to know, for example, what corporation the pilot's in. And if I want to change the order of that information, I can click and drag these up or down the list. So if I wanted the corporation information after velocity, I can drag it down under there or turn it off. Radial velocity is an indication of the velocity towards or away from your ship. That can be quite important because a negative radial velocity tells me that that ship is actually coming towards me. Positive means they're moving away from me. That can be quite important. That's quite a wide column, so often I might just drag that down just to show radial. Transversal and angular velocities, columns that will give you information about how fast a ship is tracking around your ship. And from there, you can go through a whole list and turn on or off what is important to you based on what you're doing at any given moment in time. Now, just as a guide, for example, when I'm doing PvP, I will tend to have mine set up something like this. I will have on the icon, distance, name, and type. I like to know their velocity, their radial velocity, and transversal in that order. And I can drag that down, have that a bit smaller. So instantly, in fact, sometimes I also like to put their corporation, have that last so that I can close this down. Still have, when I'm fighting, that main info there, because I can know the name, the type of ship, how fast they're traveling, are they moving towards or away from me, and what kind of transversal velocity are they having around my ship. If I quickly need to know what corporation they're in, I can drag it out also to access that. That's just a guide, overview, and UI setup, and the things that are important to you is completely a whole other topic. That's just my personal preference. Way back at the start of the video, we briefly mentioned brackets when we were back here in the overview tab. So let's talk about that, because the next column, the ships column, sets up the type of brackets that we can see in space. Now, I'm going to zoom out here because we've got Billy Daniels here in fleet with us. Let's move that over here out of the way. Who's been patiently just sitting 5,500 kilometers off us this entire time. And as I look at my tactical overlay, I can see some information. As I've clicked on his ship here, I can see this information: the ship type, his corporation, his name, and the distance. And if I look up here in ships, I've got those things turned on. Ship type, alliance, if he's in alliance, which he's not, so there's only the corp name there, and the pilot name. So some of that I can turn off. Let's say I don't want to clutter all this up. I don't need to know necessarily what corp he's in at this point, so I'm going to turn off the corp ticker. It disappears. Now, this information showing on an item in space, you can customize it by turning things on and off, or you could even customize it more by adding a line break. So if I want to add a line break and drag that line break under ship name, now you see it's just compacted this a little bit more. My Stratios there, I can see on my tactical overlay, the selected item is Billy Daniels flying a Stratios and is that far away from me. It just helps give me some of that situational awareness. Now, if I was to look at, for example, the Jita Trading Hub, and let's just have a look here, I can see all of these little icons of the other ships that are in space around there. And if I hover over them, I get that same, what we call, set of brackets. It's the brackets is that in-space information. I can see there's someone's frozen corpse. These ships, if I hover over them. Now, if I want, I can turn that off. I can go to Overview Settings, hide all brackets. That tidies that up. It will still show me the information, however, of any items that I select. Most of the time, I would suggest leaving Show All Brackets on, just to give you a better idea of the bigger picture. And just before we move on to the last two tabs, there is some other customization for this bracket information. You can add brackets. For example, let's say I want to have brackets around the pilot name. I can add them here at the beginning and the end, and you'll see they'll get added to my brackets information on the screen. Alternatively, there are a couple of default bracket layouts that you could select if you prefer yours presented a given way. Totally customizable, play around with it. And you can also change boldness, font size, and color. So if I want the pilot's name to be a bit bigger and I want to make the pilot's name yellow, you'll see I can customize that. Just set it up the way that works for you. Finally, let's take a look at the miscellaneous tab. What's going on in here? This is a pretty handy little setting. Move entries with broadcasts to the top. Now, in a fleet battle where you have a fleet commander broadcasting targets, you can set this so that on your overview, anything that the fleet commander broadcasts, which we'll look at in a future video, will float to the top. Easy for you to identify what the next target is. Some of these other things you can play around with, not so important for where we're at the moment, but if you've been playing with it and you mess it all up and you just want to go back to vanilla, you can do that here. You can reset all overview settings. I would suggest before you do that though, that you export a copy of your current settings so that if you want them back, you can. So you can import and export overview settings. So all that work we've done today, let's say I'm really happy with my overview. I'm going to export it and we'll call it Newb 1, for example, and I'm going to check all to make sure everything gets exported and hit export. Do I want to overwrite the existing file? Yes, and you'll see it actually gives me the address on my PC where the file is stored. Hit OK, and now if I need to, I can actually import that. So let's go and let's say I mess up, I've reset everything, or I've played with another overview, you'll see now it's gone back to vanilla. But if I want the other one back, we just import it, open overview settings, miscellaneous, import Newb 1, which is the one that we saved, import it, and we're back to where we were. You can also share your overview with other players. So let's say I wanted to give Billy Daniels a copy of my awesome overview. In the fleet chat window, I can go share, click and drag that down, hit enter, and in the chat box, this will come up, and Billy or anyone else in that fleet could actually then import and load that overview in for themselves. So a nice, neat way of being able to share your overview settings. And last of all, the history tab will show you the last 15 overview profiles you have loaded. Okay, so let's say, for example, in Fleet Chat, Billy has shared his overview with me, and I'm going to load that. You'll see it's come up in here now. So it keeps a history if I want to go back to that, or if I get overviews from a few different pilots that I want to try out, I can jump between them and they're stored locally in my history tab. Well, we have covered a heck of a lot of ground in this video, so I hope it's been useful. Like I said earlier in the video, my goal here is just to give you the tools to be able to create what works for you. I don't want to tell you what tabs to set up or what should be on them, but I want you to just know how to do it so you can think through and discover the process, because that's part of the beauty of Eve, is this discovery, is to discover what you need to have, and at least you know how to create it. But I am going to give you one very last quick example. A common tab that PvPers, for example, may want to have would be a drones tab, so that you could quickly jump to a tab or an overview that only is showing drones if you want to attack those drones. So let's quickly do it. Let's go to our add tab. I'm going to call this a drones tab. I'm going to go to the overview settings, and I'm going to wipe everything from this preset. I'm going to go to my types. I'm going to deselect all. I'm going to right click on drone and select all. So you'll see all drones are selected now on this tab. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to call the preset drones red. I'm going to call it drones red because on this one I'm only wanting to see enemy drones, not my own drones. I only want to see the ones I might want to kill. So on my drones tab, I'm going to load the preset to tab called drones red. And now I just see the drones that are in space around me on this drones tab. However, I see both my own drones, the ones in my fleet here, and my enemy's ones here. And this is Billy, who we've booted from fleet. But you'll see that the standing, remember he had terrible standing, that's also applying to his drones. Now I want to turn off my drones. So I'm going to go into the overview settings, and in the state, so in the states, I'm going to turn off or don't show a state that is my fleet. So in other words, my drones now have disappeared. So I've got this overview tab. I'm going to save it. Don't forget to save and overwrite. So now I have a preset called drones red that I can jump to if I quickly want to see an enemy's drones around me, that I could now target them up and try to destroy them in a PvP battle just as I would a ship. Thanks so much for hanging in there for this video. I hope I haven't confused you, but hey, just pop some questions in the comments if there's more you need to know. Or what I've been loving is experienced players also adding further input in the comments, and maybe in an episode coming up soon, I hope to pull all those together and just do like an episode where we're just adding all these little updates and extra tips that some of you amazing Eve players have been contributing. Good job. Well done.